All right. We have the stream. We have the audio. We have the people. Welcome. Benchmarking exercise. Do you all have the repo cloned and maybe done a build already? There should be build instructions in the README. Notably, you will want to basically always compile build with the runtime benchmarks feature turned on, because you'll be writing benchmarks. So for the tests, you want that. And then for running the actual benchmarks, you also want it when compiling the runtime. Yes. So the overall structure should look familiar because I cribbed off of the assignment template, adjusted it slightly, included a palette identity that's like a stripped down version of the one that you find in Substrate in Polkadot SDK. What are we trying to do here? So we saw the benchmarking lecture in the morning, sort of talking about things generally, the concepts and so on. And the idea now is to practice it, right? And so what we want is to learn to analyze the complexity patterns, get practice in that, learn to choose appropriate parameters, and sort of implement these specific scenarios, and to understand how these things are affected. And so it's quite clear in the README, in the exercise instructions, we have these two benchmarks: clear identity inline usage and clear identity double map usage. And these are the two ones that I want you to implement. They're not super duper straightforward, easy, so it's a little bit of a challenge. It's fine if you don't get it right on the first try. That's why we're doing this. But that's sort of the idea. Get these benchmarks and then run the benchmarks and generate the weights file at the end. So for that, we will go into the identity palette, into the benchmarks. And then you can look for the to-do, right? And then we have these. So a thing about this thing is I decided to make it not quite production ready in order to illustrate something. That's why we have two benchmarks, inline and double map, because I decided to adjust the implementation of the palette slightly to something that you wouldn't have in production because it has two alternative versions. So we will look at two alternative versions of about how the registrars, the identity judges, how they could provide those judgments. And so here it's combined in one palette. Normally it would be two versions of the palette, right? Like I could have also done this where I have two branches. One branch is the inline branch and one branch is the double map branch, but you would need to switch back and forth, would be awkward. So that's why we do it this way. So that's why the code is not quite production level, but mostly it's meant to be production level. Kind of simplified production level code. You can see that we already have some benchmarks. So for example, for the set identity one, we have a benchmark already. And I think we even have actual weight there, yeah. We have like different, like we have the refund mechanism thing that we talked about. We have that already in the code as well. So you can also look a little bit at the extrinsics and benchmarks that are already there to see a little bit how the Widerhase läuft, we would say in German, like how it goes. So I encourage you to look at the other benchmarks, how they're written, what they consider, in order to inform how you will write yours. So I would say I want to jump into writing code very quickly. So I would say we have a few questions now. In case you have any, you're confused where to start. Quite clearly, my sense is like you should start by running the tests with runtime benchmark features enabled for your palette. You should know how to do that. And then you will see the tests. And then you can start writing one of those two benchmarks that I want you to write. Start writing a little bit, start setting up, see like, oh, what do I need to assert afterwards for it to be right, and sort of keep executing the tests and keep writing the benchmark, which is at the same time also a test, right? Because it has the assertions at the end. And then sort of investigate like, oh, what do these functions actually do? You're already slightly familiar with the pattern because we covered it in the morning lecture. So this should, like, it should mostly be about filling in details of like, oh, okay, this one, I think I removed the sub-identities, for example, because it was too much complexity. So you just look. And then what I would do is you ask each other questions and ask the TAs questions. Ankan is over there, I think. Cisco is not here yet. I hope he shows up in a bit. But you ask us questions, and if there's a question where I feel like, that would probably be good for everyone to know, then I will go here and talk about it, or even maybe write a little bit of code or pseudocode or something. Yeah. Sound like a good plan? Yeah. Okay. So questions. Microphone. Bring this man a microphone.
If I previously installed OmniNode, do I have to install it again?
No.
Okay, thanks.
No. Yeah, so there might be some instructions in there to install the OmniBencher. You won't need it for running the tests, so you don't have to do it right now, but you could do it in the background if you wanted.
I see only one function, clear identity, in the lib while we're asking to benchmark for 2, right?
Right. Okay, I tried to explain this. So it's one function. So it kind of, in some sense, it illustrates a thing we talked about earlier, which is you can have more than one benchmark for one extrinsic. Normally, you would have like the average case and the worst case or something. In this case, you are benchmarking 2 variants. Because if you look at the file, you will see that there's 2 ways to provide judgments. There's provide judgment inline and there's provide judgment double map. And so we basically look at if people only used the inline stuff, what would clear identity do? And we write a benchmark for that. And then we would say, okay, what if people only use the provide judgment double map? And then how would clear identity be different? And so that we have these 2 paths on how you can use the palette, which again is not quite how you would use it in production, but I think will illustrate nicely, okay, what if it's all inline? What if it's in the double map? And how that affects the clear identity. And part of why we want to do that is to see like, oh, you can have one extrinsic clear identity, but depending on the behavior in the palette and how it's used and, the storage and what, the behavior will be different. And so it's on you to set up the conditions right. So for the inline, assume everything happened inline, the corresponding extrinsics and so on, storage use. And for the double map one, assume everything happened with the double map. So the 2 paths. Perfect. Cool. All right. So the question came up, what is inline, what is double map? And I think I was not specific enough about what that means. So we have 2 extrinsics. One is called provide judgment inline, and the other one provide judgment double map.
Alex?
Yeah.
Zoom.
Zoom. Thank you. Does that work?
A bit more maybe, or my eyes are not as
more?
good.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's okay.
That's okay. All right. Where was I? So we have provide judgment inline, and we have provide judgment double map. So in a normal implementation of the identity palette, you would pick one of these and say like, oh, the strategy I'm using is I will have my judgments inline. So what does judgment inline mean? It means we take the identity struct, yeah, and there is a judgments field in the struct inline. That's why I called it that. There is a vector here, and then we can binary search, and we can, like, oh, if it's sticky, we don't update it, and otherwise we do, and that's the details of how the judgments work, right? Point being, it's inside of the identity struct, which is why I called it inline. Now, there's the other one, which is provide judgment double map. And here we have a different strategy where, yes, we mutate the identity, but the main thing that we do is we have a separate double map of judgments that where we have like a target and a judgment ID, and that's how we get the judgment. And then we update a counter for reasons, which we can go into. But the point being, okay, we have a different strategy here of how we manage the judgments. We have a separate storage double map that we put the judgments in. So in a normal palette, you would choose one of these strategies and then, of course, benchmark that. What I wanted to do was illustrate for you the difference between the two implementation strategies. And that's why we have provide judgment inline and provide judgment double map for those two strategies. Now, if we look at clear identity, you will see that we take the identity, which includes, of course, the inline judgments, right? The vector of judgments is in there, in the identity. So that's in there. But what we also do is we clear the double map of judgments, right? So now, of course, if you looked at the actual code as it is here and treated it as a proper palette, what you would do is you would set up the worst case where you provide a lot of inline judgments and you fill the judgments double map. That would be the proper worst case, right? The more judgments, the more stuff we have to clear. But because I wanted to illustrate the two different strategies for you, what I want you to assume is that for one scenario, for one of the two benchmarks, for the inline one, I want you to assume that all judgments were provided inline. And for the other extrinsic, for the other benchmark, the one that's called clear identity double map, I want you to assume that all judgments were made with the provide judgment double map thing, and so they ended up in the double map. And then I want you to make those different assumptions, write the different code. It will be slightly different setup code for each of them. And then when you run the actual benchmarks, you should also see a difference in the output of the statistics. And if you generate the weight file, you will see a difference in what's generated there in the weight file as well. Does that make it a little bit clearer? The idea behind it? Any more questions about it? Like, so who feels like they have a clear next step on what they want to do next as part of this exercise? You have a question? Maybe we can organize your microphone. Iman has one for you.
I'm thinking I want to use provide judgment double map in the implementation of the benchmark, but will that affect the actual benchmark?
Will that affect?
Because
okay, so the benchmarks only benchmark what is marked here as block. So calc Fibonacci, which we don't have, but we could have. So the one that has block will only benchmark what's inside the block. The one that has extrinsic call, which is presumably what you want to use, I only put the block there to make it compile. Presumably you want to use this one. This one will only benchmark what's under the extrinsic call tag macro thing. So any code here will not be measured. This is just setup. Yeah. Cool. All right. So who feels like they don't have a clear next step of what they're going to try next with the exercise? We're still confused. Cool. Confused. Cool. All right. 3 people is fine. I'll go to you and we'll figure it out.